I'm Scott Allen Miller, and on today's episode, or on this special episode, I'm going to answer the question that I get asked every day. Pretty much, literally, whether it's family or friends or business associates, somebody asks me, why did you choose Nicaragua? You have a whole world of choices, literally. You have experience having lived all over the world. You've lived in many countries, visited many more. What made you finally choose Nicaragua as your home country for the future, the place where you're going to permanently reside for the foreseeable future? It's a good question. For us, it may seem obvious, but when people ask it, it's a legitimate question. We had so many choices. What made this one stand out so much? That's what I'm going to answer today. Let's start with an obvious one: safety. Nicaragua has recently become the safest country, that is for violent crime, in the Western Hemisphere, passing even Canada. Not only is it the safest in Latin America, it is safest in all of North America and South America, including Central America. It stands out as being extraordinarily safe, at least for violent crimes. Petty crimes, pickpocketing or, snatch and grabs, those do exist, much more like in Europe than in the United States, where that is very uncommon, but that is not a scary thing and doesn't tend to dissuade someone from wanting to live somewhere. Unfortunately, it didn't become the safest country because it became so much safer than it was before, but rather because Canada had an upswing of violence due to the COVID pandemic and the political situation that changed because of it. But it doesn't change the fact that Nicaragua shines as the safest country in the region. Of course, there are safer countries in places like Singapore in Southeast Asia, or much of Europe may be safer, but they have other concerns such as distance from home, which we'll talk about in a second. COVID, of course, brings up the topic of healthcare, and Nicaragua has a functional public healthcare system that is actually handling the pandemic quite well and functions decently well even when there isn't a pandemic. Healthcare here is not world class, but it is pretty good and better than most of the countries that we are used to in North America. When Americans or Canadians visit Nicaragua, they tend to be pretty excited by the quality and cost of the healthcare here and how quickly they're able to get care when necessary. We may not have chosen Nicaragua solely because of healthcare, but it's certainly a positive in the overall scheme of things. If we were only looking at healthcare, then Southern and Western Europe would be the obvious choices. But more than adequate healthcare is certainly available here. Along the same lines, in 2020, Nicaragua ranked #1 in the Western Hemisphere and #5 in the world for women's rights. As the father of 2 daughters, this is important. We want a place where our daughters are safe, and while no place is completely safe and women are in danger to some degree anywhere in the world, with the exception of a few Nordic countries, Nicaragua ranks as the absolute best. When it comes to equality, this is about as good as it gets, and for decades, Nicaragua has been on a path of continuous improvement and has one of the greatest levels of engagement of women in government. So this is a really good place, not just for people on average, but for women especially. So we've taken a lot of things into account from a safety perspective, plus the government here is relatively stable compared to much of the Western Hemisphere. I keep saying Western Hemisphere, and we're going to come to that in a second, but it's important that in this region, almost every factor that significantly affects us as foreigners who want to live in this country, people who want to immigrate here, we get some of the best that there is to offer. And when we don't get the best, we get very good, such as healthcare. It's not the best, but it's good. The best in the Western Hemisphere, of course, would be Colombia, but they're not that far away. If we need to use them, we can. Location is a big deal. Nicaragua is in the middle of everything while being sort of off the beaten path. It's a great combination. We're in the middle of Central America. By car, we're only a few hours from 2 neighboring nations and within driving distance to about 6 or 7 countries. And if we want to hop on a plane, which isn't too bad, we can quickly be almost anywhere in North or South America. And of course, there are connections to Europe and more difficult connections to Asia or anywhere else. But in general, we're able to get to lots of exciting places with relative ease and relatively low cost. We're not the best in the region, we're just kind of centrally located. Unfortunately, as a negative, we do not have a major international airport such as San Jose, Panama City, or Ciudad de Mexico, but Managua Airport has quick connections to all of those locations, whether we fly there from Managua or simply take a bus. Most of those we can access as simply as hopping in a taxi or taking a minibus, which will take us directly to those airports. It may take quite some time, but it is low cost and convenient. And then we have major airports with global connections at very low cost. For getting back to the United States, which matters to us because of family, we are Americans, it is nice that Managua to Miami is only 2 hours and 5 minutes. Miami to Houston is about 2 hours and 30 minutes when those flights are available after COVID is over, and costs can be as low as $85 for a flight, thank you to Spirit. With all those connections, it means we can get back to the United States whenever we need to, except for during COVID, for extremely low cost, extremely low effort, and extremely little time. It's close enough that if we needed to work in the United States for as little as a day or two, we could hop a plane and be there, and it wouldn't be a major problem. That's a big deal. There aren't very many countries that offer that kind of connections for us back to family and to work and to business and so forth. So both physical proximity and ease of access are very important long-term factors. We are also in the same time zone as Texas, which is the place that we left in the United States when we moved here. So our time zone has not changed. For people who speak to us online, which is the majority of people that we know, they don't see our time zone as having changed at all, both for personal lives and for work. It makes it extremely easy for us to continue working as we always have, with no disruption, no changes, no visible change to the outside world. And all those same things, that proximity, that time, that ease of flights, also means that our internet connections from here are physically very close to the United States. This is not something that most people think about, but for us who work in the United States most of the time, we care about the amount of latency for our phone systems. And many countries, such as Europe, may have hundreds of milliseconds of latency under normal internet connections, which means when you're using a phone to talk back to business in the United States or to Canada, you can hear it, even if it's not dramatic. But from Nicaragua, the time is typically about 55 milliseconds, and it's really stable. With 55 milliseconds on a good connection, it is impossible to detect that you're not right down the street. We sound exactly the same as people who are local in the United States. That is a really big deal. We are able to keep working completely transparently. That ability to work goes far beyond simply having the physical connections to make it possible. Nicaragua makes it completely legal for us under a tourist visa to come here and to continue to work for our jobs in the United States. We don't have to do anything to be able to work here. And as long as we're working our old American jobs, we are tax-free in Nicaragua, and as long as we are resident in Nicaragua, the United States reduces our first $105,000 per year income to 0 taxable rate. We go to normal taxable rate after that. That is a standard. It is not applied to Nicaragua specifically, but the combination of US tax law and Nicaraguan tax law means that our taxes are insanely lower being here in Nicaragua, while our right to work is every bit as good or even better than in the United States. So that is incredibly important. Of course, we could go to most places in the Western Hemisphere and continue to work, but there would simply be more complexity to it. There's also the ease of movement. For coming to Nicaragua from the United States or Canada, Bolivia, or many other countries in the Western Hemisphere, your access to the country is automatic. You get 90 days simply by showing up at the airport. You don't need to fill paperwork out ahead of time, except for your COVID paperwork, of course. And your 90 days is completely, you have the movement within the country. You can work, you can be a tourist, you can live, you can transfer money within reason. All those things you're able to do immediately. And if you're an American or most of the Western Hemisphere, you can get nearly automatic extensions for 3 times to your 90-day visa to get it up to 180 days. And after the 180 days, all that is required of you is to cross one of the visa zone borders, the nearest ones being the border to Costa Rica, about 5 hours drive from here, or the one into Mexico, which is quite a bit farther, or to fly to any of the major airports, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, or further, such as the United States. The moment we touch any of those countries, we are eligible to return to Nicaragua for another 180-day stay with all the rights and privileges we had the first time. So while that sounds a bit inconvenient, twice a year having to cross into another country that is not Honduras, El Salvador, or Guatemala It's not a very big deal and something we normally would do anyway, whether it's visiting family in the United States or simply taking a quick vacation to Costa Rica to see the opera. It's simply really easy to do. And we choose to live in northern Nicaragua, which is a separate topic. Why did we choose Leon in northern Nicaragua over many other options? But being where we are, we're at one of the farthest point from one of those borders, and it's still incredibly convenient. Most expats live far closer, maybe half the distance, to one of the major visa zone borders, with a large contingency living within 1 hour of that border. If you were one of those people, it would be so convenient you'd never think twice about it. You wouldn't even bother with the 30-day extensions. You would just run down the street, cross the border, pop back in, and be done with it. And then you get an automatic 90 days, but you don't have to do the 30-day. And all that is before residency options, because there's official, this is the unofficial residency, right? The continuous tourist residency. But there's also easy paths to official residency, whether it's a retirement residency where you get 1 year at a time for relatively easy proof, or an investment style residency where you get 5 years once you apply, and you don't have to worry about any paperwork for 5 years, and all you have to do is every 6 months pop into Migracion at the capital, say hi, and let them know you're still in the country, and you're good to go. It simply is a very, very easy country to deal with in so many ways, and they do so much to make it easy as an American or Canadian or a Bolivian, a Mexican, to come here, live, continue to work, and even to invest. We're able to own homes, invest in businesses, start companies, and do that basically as easy as if we lived here. It may not be as easy as if you're an American starting a business in the United States, but it is much closer to that than you may think. It is not a big hurdle. Nicaragua bends over backwards to ensure that visitors to the country feel welcome, both because the people are friendly, but also because the legal and political systems are welcoming and facilitating to making your time here very fluid and productive and happy. A regular concern in many countries is their infrastructure, and Nicaragua may seem like one where you would suffer more than most, but the reality is that Nicaragua has some of the best highway systems in the entire Western Hemisphere. It's surprising how often we have to say best in the hemisphere, because it's that good, both for the highways and for the internet. Even in small villages, I happen to be in a large city right now, but even far out in a tiny village of only a few hundred people, way out in the country, you almost always are able to get high-speed, door-to-door fiber for your internet, plus you generally have cable and wireless options. And speaking of wireless, the phone network here is dramatically faster than what we're used to in the United States and Canada, with regular speeds having been available for years in excess of 300 megabits per second on cell phones. So the need for fiber, the need for cable in your home is much lower because there's other options, unlike in the United States where you really rely on those services. Here, you have all those things. They're rock solid and very affordable, and available in places you would never think you'd be able to get internet at all in the United States. You can't talk about Nicaragua without talking about the weather. We're very far south. We're not on the equator, but we're closer to it than most people in the West are used to. Being where we are, it is exceptionally warm. Now, most of Central America, from Costa Rica to Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala, you're used to much cooler weather because they have high altitudes. Nicaragua, however, is much closer to sea level and is extremely warm, even for Central America. Most Americans, I think of weather more like Nicaragua when thinking of Central America than they do of the other countries, which are actually far colder than most of the United States most of the year. But here in Nicaragua, it is warm, and we chose Leon, the second hottest city in the country. We're nowhere near as hot as Chinandega, which is possibly the hottest city in Latin America, and only 45 minutes away to the north, but we are very warm. Nicaragua mostly lies near sea level. There are very few seasonal variations. There is a dry season, which is cooler, and a wet season, which is warmer, but because of the rain, it feels cooler, so they think of that as winter. They think of the other as summer. It is flipped from what it should be in North America. The reality is the temperatures only vary by about 5 degrees between the seasons. It is relatively stable year-round. Hot days and cold days are not that far apart. and it is beautiful all the time. Because of that, it is an outdoor culture. You always do things outdoors. Buildings are designed to be open air all the time. You almost never air condition because you adjust to the temperature and you stay in it. You simply use fans or whatever to stay cool, and it works for most people. Now, when you get into Chinandega, you start needing air conditioning, but much of the country lives without it and does quite well, simply because you don't go through these hot and cold cycles where you can't get used to the heat. Here you get used to it, and you can live with it, and it's actually quite comfortable. It's beautiful. We have gorgeous sunsets almost every day of the year, and when we get storms, they're really interesting. It makes for a wonderful lifestyle, and while warm temperatures year-round is certainly not for everybody, it is something that draws a lot of people here. For me, I prefer the cold climates of like Ireland or Scotland, where it stays cold but never snows. Never snows. But if I have to trade things off, I will pick hot weather to avoid the snow over nice overall, but it snows sometimes, almost every time. I appreciate the weather here quite a bit. Now, Nicaragua may not be famous for food the way that Peru or Mexico are, but they are really, really serious about their food, and the quality of food available here in Nicaragua is excellent. If you're a meat eater, Nicaragua rivals Argentina and Brazil for their steak culture. And if you're a vegetarian like me, Nicaragua is known for simply high quality organic produce everywhere. Loads of fruit, lots of vegetables, and the staple of the diet is rice and beans. The food is delicious and people take it seriously. There's a ton of street food and the cost of food is extremely low. You can afford to eat great every day on any budget. That's fantastic. There are places that you could go with larger, more interesting dietary options, but there are very few that are as affordable and extremely few that are as high of quality. The variety may be much higher in a lot of places and may be a lot fancier. Finding fancy food, really upscale dining here in Nicaragua is not the easiest, but getting high quality food anywhere is extremely easy. Every little village, every little street vendor, they take their food seriously. If your food isn't good, you aren't going to make it in this environment. So eating anywhere here is bound to be an adventure that makes you very, very happy. It's also one that makes you very, very healthy. Losing weight here is very easy because the food is so healthy and you spend so much time naturally walking around outside, because why get in a car when you have beautiful weather indoor now all year round, and there's always cool things to walk by, and everything's built to be outside and walking distance. You don't need a car to live here. We can't reasonably talk about any country that you may want to live in without tackling cost of living. That's possibly the largest single factor, maybe other than safety, that we really think about when making these decisions. And Nicaragua is no slouch when it comes to cost of living. It is not the cheapest country in the region, let alone in the world, but it is very competitive. In the region, generally Guatemala is considered the most cost-effective, but it is only a small percentage less expensive than Nicaragua. Nicaragua competes very well against anybody, and the differences will only be within a few percentage points. But compared to the cost of living in places like the United States or even Mexico, it is extremely low. You can't get much better without going really, really far away, such as to Southeast Asia, to be able to find something where you're going to be able to live on a dramatically lower budget than here. Some examples: you can get an entire meal here of very high quality for around about $1. That's a big deal. Now, of course, that's not fancy food, that's not McDonald's, but you can get good food, good coffee, all kinds of things at prices you would not believe. Even in big tourist areas, you can get large barbecue dinners on the street for $2. So the ability to eat is really, really affordable. For housing, it really depends where you want to live, of course, but even here in one of the fancier cities that has a lot of extranjeros, of expats who live here, you can get a large colonial house, maybe 2,000 square feet, for around about $350 a month. That's for 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, and loads of open space, walking distance to everything. If you want to live in a smaller village, you could do pretty well for under $300. And if you want to make do with a 1 bath, 2 bedroom modern place in the heart of one of the non-touristy cities like Matagalpa, you could be looking at just $200 a month to live. And in most of those cases, the utilities are included, or at least some of them. In the case of the one example I gave, $350 a month, 2,000 square feet, walking distance to absolutely everything, and all utilities except for electric are included, meaning internet, television, water, garbage pickup, all that stuff. If you want to hire a maid, you may only spend $100 a month for a part-time one. $300 a month would absolutely get you a full-time maid, and possibly much less. Paying for services here is simply an option. You don't need to be expensive. You don't need to have a big budget to be able to live very differently than you do in other countries. And while that may seem like, wow, is that really okay? It's really good for the economy to hire more people because there is a high unemployment rate. So coming in and finding ways to hire people for more service-oriented jobs is important, and something that the government is really looking for people to be willing to do, because you make a big difference to the economy. You're taking someone from the street who was unable to provide for their family before and making them able to do so. And while those numbers may seem pretty low, when you actually put them into local economic numbers, you realize that a two-income family making $200 or $300 a month is actually more than enough to live on. It is still very lean, but it is not like the United States where that would cause you to starve. At a total family income of $400 a month, you can afford to have a decent house, a safe house with internet and a cell phone, and to feed your family and do basic things. You're not going to probably own a car at that rate, but you do have the ability to live. The financial picture here, the economics of life in Nicaragua are so dramatically different than the United States that it's hard to picture just how much a dollar is able to buy, because it ripples through the economy. Because the incomes are lower, the cost of all goods are lower, and you don't need as many goods. And the simple reality is you don't buy as many consumer goods as you do when living in the United States. So because of that, most of the products that are consumed here are created locally or nearly locally. A lot come from Costa Rica and Honduras. And when they do so, their cost is much lower. So being able to get fresh food, fruits and meats and vegetables and breads, everything's being made locally, and the cost of it is extremely low. So the money goes really, really far. So coming here and living here is far more cost effective than people often can even imagine. They may know, oh, that's a really cheap place, I'm sure my money goes farther. Yes, it does. It goes really, really far. Coming here on a $1,000 a month budget is enough to live extremely well. You could easily go out all the time on a budget like that, have a really nice apartment, and people certainly move here with far less. And if you had to survive on $300 or $400 a month, you could absolutely do so even as a foreigner. I wouldn't recommend it, but you absolutely can. It is a completely different world. Of course, we have to mention the people and culture. Nicaragua is friendly and welcoming. It is a Western culture. It is one that is very familiar to those of us coming from North America. We can integrate relatively easy here. The nation, both as people and as a country, are very welcoming to foreigners and Americans in specific. And it is just a great option. For us, it really came down to a combination of all these factors I mentioned and more. We looked at many places. There were a lot of places that made reasonable sense. Mexico was very high on our list. Most of Central America was an option. Panama we have lived in previously and love a lot. Colombia is a really good choice. All of these are cost effective. All of them are relatively close to our families in the United States. Nicaragua puts more pieces together. We have lived here previously. This was not our first time coming here. We lived here in 2015. I visited in 2019. We visited again in 2021, and very quickly just after that in 2021 made the choice to make this our permanent home and to invest in having our homestead be here. So we didn't do this blind. We knew the country, and we'd been to many other countries, both living in and visiting before, so we had a lot to compare against, and we understood how the economics and demographics and different factors would play into countries we had not lived in, so that we could compare them reasonably. For us, the ease of doing business, the ability to stay here automatically and know that we had a lot of assurances that we were welcome and able to stay with very little risk, the low violence, the protections for our children, the political stability, the rapid ease of getting back to our families in the United States, the options to travel, and being centrally located to so many things we wanted while being in the same time zone and being able to effectively stay connected with back home while still being so far and exotic away that we felt like we were in a new place, and being in a country, as most of the ones we considered, speaking Spanish, which we do speak some, makes life much easier. Moving to a country that speaks something very, very exotic can be very difficult, even if that's Portuguese. But moving to a place that speaks Spanish, for us, Spanish or Italian really makes life pretty comfortable. We feel confident being able to read it and write it and learn it as needed. And our Spanish is coming along very quickly, and we've put a lot of effort into it previously. So that was a big factor. But you had to take all of it together. Nicaragua is a place that we love. It makes us happy being here, and that's probably our #1 factor. But it's also the beauty of the beach, how much we like the culture in the cities, that we're able to maintain our business and do everything legally and have no problems with the government or immigrations or anything like that. Everything is easy, and we were able to stay as connected to our families as possible. There's no country that's going to come as close to all these things together as Nicaragua. And so that is what made us come to live here, and is consistently for when we have family and friends who look at Nicaragua after we've mentioned it, everybody says the same thing. Wow, those factors are what matter for me too. I would love to live there. I wish I could do that. That sounds like paradise. And the reality is, it is like paradise. It sounds ridiculous, but Nicaragua is one of the greatest places to live. I'm not going to say there aren't cons. Of course there are. This is a poverty-stricken country with a lot of challenges, but it's also an amazingly wonderful country where we feel confident that we're making a positive impact on them, and they are making a positive impact on us. It is a place where we want to be able to raise our children. It is a place that is going to allow us to live the lives that we want to live as best as we can. And one of those big things for us is the incredible availability of the ocean. Right now I'm recording this in the beautiful city of León, where we have a house because we do like spending time in the city and getting into the real culture of the country. We also love that we have a place directly on the sand because we're in Nicaragua. Both it's a cost-effective country that allows us to do that. It is a political environment that allows us as foreigners to own on the beach, and it has a lot of both Pacific and Caribbean waterfront, so we have our choice of beautiful, beautiful ocean locations. All that together, it allows us to live in the kind of place that we want. We couldn't do this in the way that we are anywhere else. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Join my daily vlog where I talk about our lives as travelers and with kids and living in Nicaragua and even before. I've been recording a daily vlog, whether written or in video, for more than 20 years. We are the Sheep Guarding Llama vlog here on Scott Allen Miller Vlog on YouTube. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. I'll see you on the vlog.